Okay, great. So this is part 3, funding your GmbH and UG. It's GmbH and UG in the title because we're going to focus on them today because they're the most common form, and in the other lectures I told you why GmbH and UG is the standard in Germany, and it's the mechanics of converting a convertible note are really specific to those, so you have to bear with me here. Okay. So this is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you a short intro on why Legalstraße is good for you, what we did, how it works, and then we're going to talk about the funding dilemma, I called it, and why a convertible note is the solution for this. And then when you're all experts on this, we're going to talk about the pros, the cons, and the do's and the don'ts. And you don't need to take any notes on this. We're going to publish all those slides on SlideShare, and we're going to publish the video on YouTube. So the questions, usually we do them in the end, and today you can ask all the questions you want because it's not only me answering them, it's a panel, so that's what's going to happen after the talk right away. All right, so this is the reason why why we started Legalstraße. 9 out of 10 startups fail, and that number is way too high, and of course there's a lot of products that are not good, but there is also a lot of times the legal infrastructure that is lacking, and people make mistakes in the beginning that come hunt them down, and that's why they fail. And so there is hope for you guys. We created Legalstraße, which is this series of workshops and also the contracts that you can download for free and that you can use and hopefully then understand and how to use with your lawyers and your business partners. All right, why you should should use Legalstraße? You avoid the pitfalls, you don't have to pay anything for it, that's good. That also helps you bootstrap longer than you could otherwise. So we're going to talk a little bit about bootstrapping in a minute. And lastly, you join forces. We want to establish something for the community, and so founders can work together to share all the free resources that there are and the advice that they can get. All right. How does Legalstraße work? You go to legalstraße.com, and there you will see those folders, and those are all contracts that you can download for free. And when you download them, you see something like this. This is actually our convertible loan, and you can have fill out the marked passages or adapt them, and then there are some comments that should help you along the way. All right. So now let's get into the funding. This is a recap of the first workshop that we have. So it was about founding your GmbH and UG, and GmbH for all of non-Germans here is Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, UG Unternehmergesellschaft haftungsbeschränkt, and they do not only sound similar, it's pretty much the same company. And the reason for founding them is that founders, typically several people, join together, and those are the founders here, which end up being shareholders, and they create an entity of its own. So this is why this is also a person with a money hat, because you give the money, and then it's a legal entity. It can act and just like a natural person, but of course you need somebody to actually fill out the forms and sign the contracts, and that's what the managing directors are for. So this is the three kind of parts of a GmbH and UG. Most of the times with founders, these are the same people, but they don't have to be. And the good thing about the GmbH and UG is in the title, it's beschränkte Haftung, haftungsbeschränkt, which means that they have limited liability. So you don't want to be liability with your house and your family's fortune and everything that you own. That's why you create this. Okay, so here we have the GmbH UG again. And when it grows, you also get new employees and for all kinds of services. And then this is the whole growing GmbH. And also from outside, you contract with freelancers and you contract with other contractors, providers for any services that you need. And they all have one thing in common, which is they need money. So maybe as managing directors, if you are the founders, you can hold it off for so long, but employees need to be paid minimum wage. nobody's going to work for you for free. So that's the problem that any founder gets to after a while. And so that's when bootstrapping is no longer working. Bootstrapping just means that you use your own funds, you use equity, which is own capital, and of course you do this because you believe in yourself and you believe that the money you put in is going to get repaid x-fold. And the problem with that is it's only going to take you so far. So you, at one point or another, you're going to run out of money. So where do you go to? You ask people who believe in you, family, friends, and fools. And they, of course, want to help you, and they believe in your success as well. And the only problem with them is, first of all, sometimes they don't have that much money to help you, but second, they don't really know what to do. They are not professionals. They don't know under which terms they help you. If it's equity, is it debt, what do they do? So there's a lot of uncertainty here, and the convertible note could be one instrument that could help you with this. All right, another traditional way of financing is the bank. So bank loans, anybody here has a bank loan for a company? All right, nobody, because they wouldn't give you any. The reason why banks do it, because they want, of course, they want interest, they want to get repaid, and even more than that, and that's their whole business model, but they're really risk averse. So they always need securities, and you don't have any. Like they ask you, what is your company worth? And then you're like, yeah, we have IP, so you don't have any. They want real estate, they want machines, and you don't have any of that. So you just have IP, you have a software at most, and so that's not enough for a bank, and so there is risk involved. And sometimes I have clients and they have a surety, guarantees, and this is really problematic because with sureties you personally become liable as the founders, and this is exactly what you wanted to avoid in the first place. You wanted limited liability and not unlimited liability. So this is not an option for most people. Okay, so when there is no security, there is risk, and that's why risk capital is the standard for any founders. And the reason people are willing to give you the money is because they want it back in X-fold, and they want shares for that. So they become shareholder of your company, and either they want to profit from your profits, or they want to sell the shares for profit in the long run. But the problem with that is you go to someone and ask him, look, can you give me money? And he's like, yes, how much do you need? And 500,000, and you're like, he's okay, I'll give it to you, but how much do I get for that? And you say, well, my company is worth 10 million, so you don't get that much for it. And he's begs to differ, and so you see that there is a certain uncertainty here. And so what traditionally you would do, you would look at the valuation of the company, and since you're such a young company, it's really hard to do. And these are the, oh, do we have that again? Okay. I don't know. What
seems to be the Wi-Fi then. No, that's just your, I think it's just your thing.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. So I'll just stay on this side. So traditionally you have those methods of evaluating a business and and it's all about how much cash flow there is, how many earnings, what's your assets, and all of these things don't work with a traditional, only work with traditional companies who are already older. And or with your company, you don't have that. You don't have profits. You cannot rely on any asset value and stuff like that. And so they ask for, well, what are other companies worth, and comparable business? So what are they? And you're like, well, my business is unique. I have a USP, I have so many USPs, and so there is no way you can compare me to any of those. And that's where the problem starts. And in the beginning, it's just really very hard to do. And this is why we're looking for another solution. And you will be really surprised to hear that we have the solution here, and it is the convertible note. So we created this template, and it's the first one that is bilingual. So it's in English and in German. And you can, if you're German, you can delete the English part, and if you're not German, you can delete the German part. Just make sure that you don't forget the signature lines, and there is also a clause saying the German version prevails, so this should be deleted as well. But other than that, you can ready to use it and to adapt it. We propose this convertible loan because it's a good balance between the rights of the lender and the company, which is you. And all you have to do is fill out a couple of highlighted fields, just like I showed before. And the last thing you need to do is, of course, to sign it. And as a lawyer, I always have to tell you about risk. And so there is a risk that you may be able to, or may have to sign it in front of a notary. We made sure in this document that it shouldn't be. And the industry standard is that nobody goes to a notary. But it could be a problem if some judge thinks that it should be notarized, and then you will have some problems and the contract is invalid. So I can tell you going to the notary for a 100,000 convertible note costs you 500 euros. Maybe the lender is going to pay for it, but maybe it's for some good night's sleep worth of you. You know, I just have to tell you, I would advise to do so. Okay. All right. So what is a convertible note? There are two terms: convertible note and convertible loan. And I prefer convertible loan because it's helping you with the definition. Because a convertible note is, when you Google it, I think it's got 2 times the results. So convertible note is the more common name, but convertible loan for me is better to explain, because a convertible loan or note is a loan that converts into shares. And so it starts off as debt, just like with a bank loan, and it turns into equity, into shares. And the typical runtime is around 1 to 2 years. So it's a bridge financing for the first for the seed phase of your startup. And so the lender just gives you money, and after the time he wants the money plus interest back from you. And this is a typical loan, and the reason he's doing it is because there is the possibility of converting it into shares, and this is when there is a financing round happening. So a financing round is someone else investing in your company, and he's taking shares as well for that. And so that solves the dilemma that we had before, because when there is the financing round, there is actual valuation. There is someone who took the care, who did the due diligence, and who is willing to put a valuation on the company. And that's the time when the convertible lender says, I'm going to do that as well, and I'm not going to take your valuation, I'm going to take a discount from that. And that's just fair and square, because he took the risk much earlier in time, because otherwise there wouldn't be an incentive for him to give you money when there is nothing to evaluate. So he's piggybacking the valuation of the investor and the financing round minus a discount for his early risk. And that's typically 15 to 30%. I think more like 20, 25 is usual. Okay, so now you have all the information that you need to fill out the convertible note template that we put online, because they were already mentioned. The first is obvious. You have to put in the company lender data. There is no negotiation here. And something that is important for a point that I just mentioned is also that you need to put in the shareholder data, so that all the shareholders of the company become a party to the convertible note as well, because it's a legal reason. It could mean that you don't need to notarize it. Okay? Like I said, notarize it, but if you put in the shareholder's note, shareholder data, and they are part of the agreement, it's less likely that this is going to happen. Okay? So the next one is pretty obvious as well. He needs to lend you money, so you put in the amount. And this is typically in euro, it could be in US dollar. You just have to make sure, it could be cryptocurrencies. You just have to make sure that you set the conversion then. Well, when it's cryptocurrency, do you pay him back in cryptocurrency, or do you set a conversion rate right now and determine what that is worth in euro? So that's some extra care that you need to take there. Third, interest rate. This is something which is good for founders, what I'm going to say right now, because keep it low. There is tax reasons for it. First, you as founders would have to keep reserves for those interest rates because you never know when the financing round is going to happen. Second, for the lender, it's also tax reasons. I think he would need to withhold, no, he would need to declare them in taxes. So he would need to be taxed on them anyways. And so usually you have like interest rate of 6-8%. And with the convertible note, you can go much lower than that because there's the discount. And because of the discount, that's the kind of the compensation that he's receiving. Okay? Now the due date, I mentioned typical is 1 to 2 years. This is just to stretch that this is a bridge financing typically. So in the beginning, you don't know how to evaluate your company, and this is for the first 1 or 2 years. And also, if you make this too short, then you have to pay it back really fast. So maybe you're not able to get a financing round in that time. So be careful with that, with the due date. So that's the second to last. The discount, I already mentioned it. I think you can be generous here. I saw 50% at one time. That was out of the way, I think. I don't know. But anything between 20 and 30, I think, is pretty usual. And it's, of course, it depends on the risk that the investor took or the lender took when giving you the money. And this is the last one, financing round. And this is the number that defines when there is an investor putting in money, how much money does he need to invest in order to trigger the conversion. This seems really theoretical right now, so that's why we're going to look how it works in action. And this is just a standard loan and how it works over time. We have your company again, and this is your share capital. And after a while, your share capital is gone, and that's why you need money. And so here comes the lender, and the lender is typically, I took a regular natural person, and there are companies who do that, but typically it's business angels, or like I said before, it could be one of the 3 Fs, friends, fools, family, who grant you a convertible loan. And what you do is you sign the contract, and then he's giving you the money, here we go. And it's entered for 1 to 2 years. And so at the end you have to repay him. And did you see this? So there's more than before. That's the interest. So there's some extra stack of coins, and that's what you have to pay him back. So that's why he did it, supposedly. Okay, but this is a really boring case. Now let's get into the real action where the conversion takes place. So we start just the same way. There is the lender, he wants to pay you money, and then before the end of the loan, we have the investor putting in money. And he's, of course, he has big pockets. He's from the United States, pays in US dollars. And how does the investment work? The investor becomes a shareholder, and that's when the lender joins in, and he also becomes a shareholder. So now you're not only the founders, you have an investor, and you have the lender in the shareholders list. And the good thing is you don't have to repay or pay back the lender because he just converted that. So he's converting his claim against the company into shares. And when the company receives the claim against itself, it's confusion, that's the legal term, I think, and that's when it ceases to exist, and so everybody's happy. All right, let's look at the left side in order to be able to calculate all of this. Just the investor, he's investing into, that's just an example, in a GmbH, and GmbH most start with 25,000 shares, and he's investing at a pre-money valuation of 800,000 euros. Pre-money means before he is investing, the company is worth 800,000 euros. So those 25,000 shares are worth 800,000 euros. How much is he going to invest? He's going to invest 400,000 euros. So where do they go? They go into the company. Oh, actually, that's the formula. So how to calculate how many shares he's getting from that? So old shares is 25,000 times investment, which is 400,000, divided by valuation 800,000. So 400 divided by 800 is a half. So 25,000 a half is 12,500. That's what you see here. And magically, he becomes a shareholder with 12,500 shares. And as you can see here, that's why it's called capital increase. The GmbH increased its capital from 25,000, which was there, to 37,500, and the post-money valuation is 1.2 million. So you just take the pre-money valuation and add the investment, because the money is in the company right now. The company got worth more because of the money that was worth before, plus what you just put in. So that's the terms, and yeah. And this is done by a capital increase, because alternative to a capital increase would be the founders would sell some shares, but this would only benefit the founders and the Finanzamt, the financial authorities, because the GmbH would not receive the money, only the sellers, and this is being taxed. And when you do it like with a capital increase, there is no taxes, and all the money goes into the company, actually the capital reserves, and the GmbH can spend all that money. All right, now we're ready to tackle the conversion of a GmbH. So we have the same GmbH. Now we have our lender, and here I put some numbers in. You see 147,000 is it's an odd number, but when you take 1.5 interest over a year, it adds to 150,000, and that's why I chose the example, because it's easier to calculate. So because you have to remember to not only convert the loan, but also the interest. This amounts to 150,000. We have a discount of 25%, and now we have to look where to take this 25% off from. It's the pre-money valuation that we just saw. Okay, so for the investor, actually nothing changes in the beginning. He's just doing his thing. And now we do the lender. He's converting at 600,000 euro. So it was as if he had invested at a valuation of 600,000 euros. And this means that he gets more shares pro rata, proportionally, than the investor. And so he's receiving 6,250 shares, and that's the capital increase. So the capital increase is not only by what the investor put in, but also by the lender. And so we end up with 43,750. And now you can calculate the percentages. What you always have to do is, of course, think what happens to you as founders. And so before, your founders had 100,000, you had 100%, and now you have 57.1, and the rest is going to investor and lender. This is, of course, no problem, because the company is worth more now because you have more money in it. So it's just the pie got bigger. And so now you have to share the pie, that's all. But it got bigger. All right. A hot topic with convertible notes is the cap. It's pretty standard, especially in the United States, I think. Here, it happens quite a lot, but I'm not too much of a big fan, but we're going to discuss that later on. What changes with a cap? You can introduce a maximum amount at which the lender will convert. So we saw before he converted at 600,000, and now we can agree in the convertible contract, maximum I'm going to convert is 450,000, doesn't matter what. And since the actual valuation is higher, 800,000 compared to 450,000, he's going to convert at 450,000, and this changes his numbers. Before, he would receive 6,250. Now he receives more than 8,000, 8,333. And so what we have to do is we also have to raise the capital more, and this changes the numbers here. So before he had like 14%, now he has 18%, so it's getting much better for him. For the investor, it doesn't change too much, but for the founders, you went from 57 to 54.5. So a convertible, you see when you have a cap, there is some disalignment of interests. So when you can be happy for your lender that he got more shares, but then again, they come out of your pocket. So that's what you have to think about, and that's why we're gonna discuss the cap now. The good thing about a cap is that with a high valuation that is above the cap, the lender is happy and you're happy, and you will try to get it as high as possible, because this just means that the lender gets a bigger stake because the investor has to invest at a higher valuation. That means he's getting less shares, and percentage-wise, the lender gets more and you get more. So this aligns your interests. But on the other hand, I'm always wondering what is he supposed to do? I mean, it depends on the involvement of your lender, because if he just gave you money and he's sitting at home and not worrying about your business at all, what is he supposed to do against a high valuation? First, he was not able to negotiate a valuation in the beginning. He was not willing to do that. And second, it's just what someone else is willing to pay, and he's not even paying that. He's getting a discount. So unless your lender is involved in your company and really actively helping you, then of course he would kind of bite his own back, because by helping you to get a high valuation, he's reducing his share. Unless that is the case, I would not actually be too worried about it. And there's also some other reasons, because when you set a cap in the beginning, you kind of set a valuation for the company, because just put yourself in the shoes of the investor. The investor comes in a year later and he says, look, there is a convertible and you believe the companies would maximum be worth 450,000. Why is that? So there must be a reason. And if you've ever tried to determine the value of your company, you know it's really hard to do. And so that is the first number that this person sees. So this is kind of in his mind, or in your mind, you have to argue your way out of this number. This is really setting a benchmark, especially if you set a floor, so which I'm gonna come to right next. The floor is the opposite, which says there's a minimum valuation that you at least have to convert to. Then you kind of have a corridor. So minimum is floor, maximum is cap, and so this is kind of where maybe the next financing round is gonna take place. So, and this is the whole point that I told you about was that you're not able to determine the value, and now you sort of did it, and that's why I'm not a big fan of caps. And of course what you can do, because it's a negotiation game, you can set a high cap that is 10 million, and you're sure that you're not going to reach it, you don't have to care about it. So if 10 million is the first number that an investor sees, he's like, all right, okay. So maybe that's what he has to negotiate away from in his mind. Of course, once he did his due diligence, there is a lot of more data that he can rely on. But like, it's a negotiation game, and this is a number that at least is in the picture somewhere. So if you set a high enough cap, you don't have to worry about it, and then on the contrary, you can also negotiate for a high floor, which is good for you as well. Because if you say cap, I say floor, so it's just, I think it's just fair. Why would you unilaterally change the risk to the favor of the lender and to this favor of the company? Also, which is kind of self-evident, but when there is a cap, you don't get a discount on the cap, because otherwise that would be the cap, you know. So it's either or, okay. And the last thing, which might make sense, is if you cap the total amount of the investments. So one advantage of the convertible is that you can get a lot of convertibles, and you can pool investors, and which is a good thing, because there's a lot of people involved, there is a lot of buzz, and what you can do is agree on a maximum number of convertible amount that people can invest in. So you kind of set the dilution, you set a limit for the dilution, which is fair in a way, and I think it's got advantages for the company too. So you don't get too greedy, and you kind of set a limit, and after all, it's determined to be a bridge financing. All right. Now you're pretty much experts in this field. We can talk about the pros, the cons, the do's, and the don'ts. And let's start, because we want to sell our free convertible template. Let's start with the pros. Oh, sorry, that went the wrong way, right? Okay, so like I told you, the caps, sorry, not the caps, but the convertible solves the dilemma that you have at the beginning. Any seed company can receive fair financing, fair funding like that. Second, it's fast, cheap, and easy. The most costs that you may have are the notary costs. Like I told you, 100K is 500 euro. There is almost no negotiation taking place. There is just the 5 numbers that I talked to you about that you have to agree on. And it's rather standardized, so there is no surprises for any party. It's a fair deal after all. And one advantage that you can only appreciate after you did a due diligence is that there is no diligence. So due diligence. So due diligence is a lot of work. Your lawyers hate it. Companies hate it. I think even investors hate it. It's just you have to look through all the documents of the company. You have to look through everything. It takes forever. And this is, you don't have to do that because you don't have to determine the value of the company right now. Okay, what I just talked to you about, you can kind of hurt several investors, which is a good thing because a big investor who is actually investing big bucks is going to be more interested in the company, sees there's a lot going on. But you shouldn't campaign. You shouldn't go like on, I don't know, like make a public commercial about this or anything, because that could be illegal. But you can ask a lot of people to invest, and then you will, you should, and like I told you, you should kind of limit the number of people who should invest. So don't let this get out of hand. And the last advantage is that you stay in control, because as you saw before, in the shareholders list, there is only you guys in the beginning, as long as there is no financing round. This only changes when there is a financing round, then the investor joins and the lender joins. But up until then, you don't have to deal with shareholders resolutions. You don't have to inform anyone. It's just you guys doing your thing. So that is really, really important, and you will only appreciate that after you had someone on the shareholders list who you is pretty gnarly. All right, like everything, the convertible has its downside and its cons. And one thing people forget is that with a convertible, you just postpone the problem. Like, eventually you will have to get into the details and agree on a valuation. And you cannot do convertibles forever. And that's the one side. On the other side, if you do convertibles with caps and floors, then you already set your valuation. So you kind of did what you didn't want to do. And this is something that gets forgotten a lot of times. So next, there can be a lot of trouble between all the parties involved. So like we talked about before, the interests between the company and the lender can be misaligned. So one wants a high valuation, the other one wants a low one. This is kind of annoying. And then the investor and the investors and the lender, they kind of have different interests, because why does the investor get all these rights and I don't have them, and why was the valuation so high and why was it so low? So this is, it depends of course on the people that you have, but there is potential for arguments a lot in the company. Third thing, this is the shadow cap table, which you really need to take care of. Especially if you have a lot of convertibles, you need to always know how much you owe to whom and how many % they may be able to convert. And if you don't have a cap or a floor, and if you don't know the valuation of your company, you don't know what is going to happen in a year or in 6 months from now. So actually you think that you're in charge, but maybe once there is a financing event, a financing round, you are no longer in charge. You don't have your majorities anymore. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. And especially if you're not taking care of your financials, you don't know. So that's something that we really have to pay attention to. So also one reason why you shouldn't get too many and too greedy with the convertibles. Fourth, once you have the convertible, you need to pay it back eventually. So you may have pressure to get an investment round that you wouldn't close otherwise. So you know you need the money and you have to pay it back, so you will take a deal that is maybe not as good as it should be. And also this could kind of lead to blackmail situations. This is now really, I don't know, playing devil's advocate, but let's say if your competitor wanted to destroy you, what he could do is he could give you a convertible loan and agree on a financing round that is impossible to reach. So all he's doing is he's waiting until you don't pay back the convertible loan, and then you're going bankrupt. And that's when he's gonna pay another time, because he's gonna buy your assets. That's all he wanted in the first place. He's the first bidder on the insolvency, on the bankruptcy. So this is, I don't know any case of that. But it could happen. It could be that some easy money is not as, or friendly money is not as friendly as it seems. And especially if you have someone who says, look, we didn't notarize this, then he can say, our loan is invalid, I want my money back right now. And you say, I spend it, and then he's like, that's too bad. And on the other hand, after a year, when there is the financing round, you say, look, we didn't notarize, you cannot convert. That's invalid, we'll just pay you back. And so you can blackmail each other, and that's kind of not a good situation to be in. Right? And I think that's the last one I have. So you shouldn't enter it into a convertible too young. So I think that a founder should bootstrap a little bit. You should be able to really hustle a little bit. You know, you should try to save costs where you can. And if you start in this game too early, you need to pay back too early, and you kind of get in a hamster wheel and can't get out anymore. Okay, and now we know the pros and the cons. And so this is just my last words. The parting advice: when I would say avoid the convertible altogether. It kind of goes hand in hand with what I just said. If you don't really need the money, don't do a convertible. Like, I know it's easy and it's fast and it's cheap, but if you don't need it, don't take it, because has its disadvantages, and you have to pay it back one way or another. Okay, another reason why you shouldn't do it, or why you should do a real investment round, is when there is an investor who really has a big interest in your company and you want to involve him deeply. Because as we saw, the convertible lender, he's just outside of the company, he doesn't do anything. But if you really want him to do something, if you want him to be a strategic investor and really look into your books and help you, and especially like if there is maybe he has something to contribute, then, and only if you can agree on a fair valuation, I would consider doing an equity round. Like, just get him on board, and then your company gets stronger. And this kind of goes also hand in hand with what I was saying next. So if you have a professional investor who just won't do a convertible note, and he is the absolute dream for your company, he's the ideal partner, then I would consider doing an equity round as well, even though it's rather early and even though there is compromise altogether. But I think, and some considerations. So it's all about timing, money, and how well you fit with the investor. And that's all from me now. So.
Cool. Hello, everyone. In France, it was even more crucial to have convertible notes as a new model, because banks are the only one that can do it. So it was really a pain before. And we've seen that convertible notes bring some velocity in the fundraising process, and mostly we've seen it at the very early stages with friends and family money, where you don't want to set valuation with people that don't really know what startup are, sometimes at bridges, and sometimes at later stages where they just want to adjust the valuation every time the business improves. So I wonder how you guys see convertible notes and where you think it's best fit.
Hi. I'm actually a big fan of convertible notes early on, because what I experienced, especially with investors who are friends and family, is they don't really know what industry standards are, like how much they can control, should control, and that's a good, first of all, instrument to convince them that a new professional investor will come in later and will set the industry standards, and they get similar conditions. Also, it's hard in the beginning if you know that you're going to pivot along the way, to really figure out what your IP is. There's no IP, and clearly people take a risk. I only did convertibles in the past with caps, and I haven't talked to anyone yet who would. No, I had talked to one of our former investors. Told me that was her biggest mistake ever, that she invested in her first convertible note without a cap, and then the company skipped the seed round and went straight to Series A, and she had like a tiny share, and would have had a major upside if she would have done an equity round, but in general, from an entrepreneur's perspective, I think convertible notes are really great because you don't have to negotiate all the small nitty-gritty things.
Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, we see a lot of companies where that have raised convertible notes, especially like in the very early stages, like friends and family, angels, and I think that makes sense, right? Because for the reason you just mentioned. At the same time, you have to be aware that they're quick for a reason, right? They're quick because they don't contain a lot of stuff, right? So they're usually very simplified. There's a lot of stuff that's missing, especially on things you'll have to figure out when there's an actual round. So it's really rather postponing a lot of topics than anything else. And we have also good experience with very, very lean rounds that happened early on at seed, and it's also not that much of a cost difference. And if you work with a professional investor, then you can, just settle a few things straight from the very start. Guarantees, vesting, all that stuff that's not really ever in a convertible note, but stuff that's really, really important for your company. So I would say I have a little bit of a mixed opinion on convertibles in general, and especially what I don't like is convertibles that are not leading anywhere, right? So I think we say when there's a bridge, the bridge needs to have a beginning and the bridge needs to have an ending. And the worst bridges are the ones that actually end in nowhere. So there's a lot of convertibles like these where actually there's no one really, moving forward. The question is there going to be around or not? And then people are like, let's just do convertible. And I think therefore, like they obviously have to ask yourself the question: is that really helping anyone? So that you probably shouldn't do.
I have my own.
Yeah, you have your. You're the lawyer. You have to. You're the one that knows this stuff.
Hello. Okay, it works already. Yeah, it was working all the time. Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. I think it needs to stay bridge financing. I think I wanted to bring that across. Regarding the point with the caps, I think yes, of course, as a lender you want the cap, but as a founder you don't. So if the lender is not asking for it, I would not bring up the topic altogether. And the more, especially when you have family and friends, they don't know about it, as you said. So you help them, and I'm just wondering how as a professional investor, how do you determine, or how early do you start investing, and how do you determine the value of the company?
I mean, we go in very early, so we're usually the first institutional money into a company. And
what is early? What is
seed? Yeah, so seed, but so we don't do like very, very small kind of angel rounds. But I would say our investment starts around 500,000, and then I would say average check is around 1 million. So it's usually when the company has already raised just a little bit of money, but it's definitely not an A round, right? So, and you won't believe what type of convertible notes I've seen, and where angels are really over optimizing also. So it also goes the other way, and I think you as founders need to be super careful what you put down in these convertible notes, right? I've seen kind of 50% discounts. I've seen kind of staggered discounts, so the round doesn't get raised, the discount goes up every month and stuff like that. So it's very, very important that you are aware of the economic effects of a convertible note. It is, of course, not a financing round yet, but the financial implications on the dilution that you take on your shares is already there, more or less, because you are going to raise a round. So I agree with your point. Yeah. Of course, you might be forced into raising a round, but really your point is raising a round. You want to be raising in the next round. So I think you should rather optimize for that case. And there it's super important that you don't accept terms that will hurt you later on.
To sum it up very quickly, the convertible has a floor. The floor is made to protect yourself against too much dilution. The cap is made to protect the investor from too little ownership at the end, because if you skip around, then you get nothing. And the discount is just made to pay for the risk it takes investing before the others. And that's what Philip says. It's always made to invest before others invest. Otherwise, it wouldn't convert. And the biggest risk is for people not to understand the ownership they're going to get, both on the investor side and on the entrepreneur side, especially if you raise multiple ones, because then the investors don't know how much you're actually raising afterwards, which changes the post-money valuation and the amount of shares they get. So as a rule, for every investment we see, whether it's a convertible note or an equity round, keep all the terms very simple, because the 2% extra every month you don't raise and all these things and the dilution, in the end, they're always bad. They're always bad for both because no one knows what it gets.
I just want to make a quick case for the cap, yeah, because obviously I have to. I'm the investor here in the room, so I have to argue for the cap. But really think about it: like you are giving money, and you're paying a price for it. Yes, you get a discount for the round, but the later the round happens, the higher the valuation. Obviously, the higher is also the valuation you pay with the discount. And I think when you invest very, very early on, you give the company money, then you are enabling that company to create value with your money. So the question is like, should that incentive be reflected only in the discount, or should there be a cap, right? Should there be, okay, this is the maximum I will pay in terms of valuation. And I think in most cases that's only fair, that you're thinking about, okay, this guy, he comes in so early, he helps me get off the ground, nobody else wants to invest. I'm not ready for VC. But then the VC comes in on this crazy valuation, and the person that actually enabled you to raise that round only gets a 20% discount. So I think to work with a fair cap that's fair for you and fair for the investment is the way to go. So we don't like kind of uncapped convertibles at all.
Even I think it's fair. As long as you don't set the cap somewhere, I mean, I heard different stuff what other people do as a cap. It shouldn't be too low because that is just then you miss the point of the convertible. But if it's a fair cap, I think it's totally fine, because ultimately the hardest part is, at least for me, my experience, is in the beginning when you're basically, in our case was 2 founders and then we had 1 employee, and to get to a proof of market or proof of concept where the next person gives you money is the hardest part, and you also need at least the support of your investors if they're good professional investors, and you want them to help you, so you want them to be incentivized. It would be interesting to me, like I never even thought about asking for a floor, because I mean, I'm an optimistic person. I don't think it's necessary, or it would be necessary, and it's something that, I mean, I would have to give away something else for that, right? If I want a floor, maybe the person wants a lower cap or something. Do you, as an investor, do you see a lot of floors?
No. So I think floors are, I would say, at least in Germany, rather exception than the rule. And I think for exactly that reason. I mean, I think there's no round, obviously, that means you're dead. There is a round on a very low valuation. That means you also didn't perform the way you were kind of supposed to. At the end of the day, then why should there be a floor, right? So, I mean, I see it, but at the same time, it's also not something that's very common.
Yeah, but maybe we're gonna change that, you know. And it just seems another argument that founders have. It's something you can. So look, if we're that optimistic, then we don't have to worry about it. It's just some downside protection for you. Of course, 9 out of 10 times it shouldn't matter, and that's not what we're here for. And if you don't get an investment, then it doesn't matter anyways. But I think you have to realize it's a negotiation game, and I know I cannot get rid of caps altogether. They will remain, and there is a reason for that. But I feel like the default could be changed too. And so whenever you hear cap, you can say floor and see if that doesn't change the cap either. So you say, okay, then let's get rid of the floor, but let's have a cap that is maybe higher. And also regarding to protect the lender, maybe you should just have a higher discount. So it's I see that you want to be protected altogether, but if you manage to get the value that high up in such a short time, then that's a real accomplishment, and the discount is there to compensate the lender for that. But I'm not going to change industry standards right now, but maybe you are going to. And something that I was just worried about before was how do you, when you go in very early, how do you determine the value of a company? So what do you need, like, do you, I'll just pass this on to you guys.
Sorry.
So as a rule of thumb, what we see is people that when they raise a little money in the beginning, they try to put the cap, and I almost always see a cap. Like, I think I've never seen one without a cap, actually. And as an investor, I would be worried that an entrepreneur actually signs something without a cap with an investor. At least on the long term, I think everyone realizes what a fair deal is. And as a rule of thumb, you should try to have the cap at what the valuation should be at the next round, around that. And maybe you can explain, Philip, a little bit how the valuation works, just multiple of the fundraising. But
yeah, so just to add on that, I think that's that's really that's important to think about where should the cap be, because there's several effects, right? There's a little bit of a signaling with the cap. So the next investor is going to look at the convertible note, he's going to look at the cap, and it's like, okay, that's what you were thinking the round is going to be at, because otherwise this wouldn't be a cap. So that could go both ways, right? It could be too low and could be too high. So you also don't want to have a cap that's too low, right? Because that might kind of downplay a bit the way that the investor is looking at the round. At least some investors do that. Obviously, at the end of the day, the investor needs to look at the company objectively at the time when he's investing and value that objectively. But of course, this little cap can be a tiny bit of subjectivity to that valuation. And then, I guess, how do you value a company that's very, very early? That's obviously like the $100 million question, right? So for us, it has mostly to do with the team. So if it's an amazing team that is building something very exciting, and there might not be revenue, there might be first version of a product, but we are extremely excited about the team, then the valuation can be higher or cannot be kind of explained by revenue or by numbers, but it's basically a function of team and market opportunity, and of course then traction. But the earlier you invest, the less of this traction metric you can actually look at. But we've seen kind of seed rounds happening anywhere between 1.5 million pre and 30 million pre. Right? So there's really also not one answer to that question.
maybe you can tell us how you set up the cap when you raised your convertible notes. Just
whatever we got. So little. I mean, honestly, how are you gonna price? Like, it's really impossible to determine what a fair cap is.
What was your cap?
3 million.
3 million. Okay.
Did you hit the cap? I mean,
Pretty much.
see? Well, you could have negotiated there, but
Yeah. No, but ultimately, I mean, we're just talking about technicalities right now, right? No, we're talking about technicalities in terms of setting a cap, setting different kinds of stuff. And ultimately, when you are at the stage when you actually close a seed round, there's not just one, not just the factor. Are you going to take this money on this valuation? Maybe you have different options from different people, and maybe you decide ultimately on something that you can that makes sense for the company and you in this second, and not go through negotiations with somebody else who might even pay on a higher valuation. So you set a cap when you know nothing about the next round, actually. And you should focus afterwards on getting to the next round. So I'm actually you asked me how we set the cap. Ultimately, I'm a big fan of keeping it as simple as possible, also in the next round, even if it's an equity round, because if you raise money in a round afterwards, you'll have to go through, or you have to renegotiate all the stuff that you put in the contracts, also from an, I would say, from an investor's perspective. Yeah, I mean, that's something that is really important, that you don't over-engineer your convertible note, to me, and then also in the seed round, look how you actually make it happen, plus also have a lean structure afterwards. I have a question, a technical question. What does actually hitting the cap mean? Because does that mean that you actually, that the cap is that the cap is in place instead of of the discount, or is it, let's say you raise on 3 million, then you have a 3 million pre, or is it, if you know what I mean? If you have a 25%, if you have a 4 million pre and you've a 4 million cap, and you give 20% discount, if you say we hit the cap, does that mean that you actually raised on a 5 million pre, because then you discounted by 25%, or that you raised on a 4 million pre?
Well, for me, hitting the cap means when the cap applies. So you
Okay. Yeah.
just
That was
compare discount and cap.
We're going to go like with a couple of questions, and when we're done with that, the first question to kick off, and then we'll do it to the camera.
Let me just say that our terms are very easy and simple, and everything that you want.
One thing that Philip mentioned is that you should raise money if it allows you to go somewhere, the two sides of the bridges, and that's the biggest problem we see with convertible notes, and it's also the worst thing you can do to an investor, is to ask for 25K, which actually brings you nowhere, because it's just 1 month of cash. And there is nothing the investor likes less than saying to all his friends he's lost his money only 1 month after investment. And it's also very painful for you as an experience to have to say to the guy that you're dead. So when you raise money to have enough runway to actually build something meaningful. And if you get to raise more than 6 months of runway, let's say like a year of runway, then you should think about, should I do a convertible note or a price round? Because Philip mentioned also that when you do a price round, you can actually set up a lot of things that are important in the shareholder agreement. Like how long are your shares going to vest for? What are the liquid price for the investors, etc. And that's only something you do if you have more than 12 months.
I have just a question, I think, for all of you. So in France, before we released the standard document, it was not possible to do it, so no one was doing it. Not because of culture, but because of law restrictions. In Germany, the regulation is less strong, so you can do convertible notes even before we release the document. The question is that why in Germany is not that common to do convertible note. You see a couple of rounds happening, but it's not widely spread. Why is that, you think?
I don't know, I guess the Germans like security, and I think I think a equity round gives you obviously security on both ends. You know what you're dealing with. You know the price. You know the shares you're giving away. You know the vesting. You know the guarantees. You know the lick prefs. You know all the stuff. And I mean, it's really a question like if there's time argument is always the strongest, right? So I mean, sometimes there's time. Sometimes you optimize for time. Sometimes you optimize for other things, and then you probably shouldn't do a convertible note. Like we're completely okay with them. At the same time, if we have like a good group of people together, we know we want to work with together for the next couple of years. We have an amazing team that we would like to back. Like, why not do a round? I mean, you're gonna do it anyways at some point. So, and I mean, in the US, it's a little bit different, right? In the US, everybody does these convertible notes. I think that's just not something that ever really happened here.
I think that if the terms got way more standard, it would be used way more because people would know what to expect from it. So in the US, it's always like there's a cap and there's almost no discount now. It used to be a discount, but like the set the terms are so good for the entrepreneurs these days. But it's always the same thing. And in France, it's also a cap, 20% discount, and the floor exists. But if it exists, it's like 500K, which means the company goes bankrupt. It just saved the entrepreneurs if he does like a quick sell for like €1 million. So he gets just tiny bit of money. But like, yeah, standardization, and that's also why we do it. So we think that if people start to use it with things that are known and usual, it's going to be more useful.
Just, I mean, I honestly really like that there are standard documents because one, we did it always like, we didn't go to the notary. It was like, yeah, I have a document, let's put in a couple of numbers, sign, whatever. Money's in the bank. And also I shared this pretty, yeah, I don't know, DIY template that I have with at least 4 friends who raised convertible notes on that. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, I guess they all converted afterwards. And then you're secure afterwards. But that's how I know people use it in Germany, is like, money in the bank and now focus on work.
Let's take a couple of questions, if you have some actually. We'd love to challenge that.
Hey guys, I'm wondering how do convertible notes change based off of sector? So say as an investor, do you evaluate and negotiate differently if it's a SaaS company or hardware company or a consumer product? Are there certain sectors in which convertible notes just don't really make sense and they're not really optimal?
Good question. No, I don't think it's sector specific or that sector specific. I think it's more related to timing in terms of where the company is in the lifetime. If it's convertible to bring in new investors, or if it's a convertible of existing investors, which is actually something we haven't talked about yet, but that's actually something quite common, right? So it's a convertible in between rounds. So you have raised a round, the equity round. You're maybe not quite ready for the next equity round, but you want to invest some more, and then you raise a convertible in between from internal investors, which is completely okay because everything that needs to be said and defined is defined because there's already a shareholder agreement and there's no new people coming to the table. But for sectors, I don't know if you, as a lawyer, would you see a specific sector where? No. Simple answer, no.
I think it's the same question as asking how valuation for startup works. And actually there's no rule. And the only thing that you can say, it's basically a multiple of how much you're able to convince an investor that you can spend wisely. So if you can spend $1 million very well, then your valuation is basically going to be 4x this. And if you can tell an investor you can spend 10 million very wisely because you already have a team of 50 people, then your valuation is going to be 40x. And the cap basically works the same way. But like it mostly depends on where you are, how much revenue you do, how big your team is, and how convincing you are.
Hi everyone. This question is for Daniel. Daniel, I wanted to know what you thought about a convertible loan similar to the one we talked about today, but that doesn't have a maturity date or an interest rate, and whether that would change any of the considerations we discussed under German law. And the reason I ask is I know that we discussed US practices a little bit. What's become increasingly popular in the last 5 years is the use of a safe note, which is similar to a convertible loan, but it doesn't mature, and it doesn't have an interest rate, and it's super popular among Y Combinator companies. And I was wondering if you think, or you can envision something similar happening in Germany, because I do think that investors might have more of an appetite for something that doesn't mature, that has to get paid back in a year or two.
Well, I think I will pass on the question too, but I'll give my 2 cents first. I think you don't really need an interest rate to begin with. I mean, I suggested 1.5%, which is not really that much. I think there may be a little bit of a tax problem if you go too low, but then again, if you compensate it with a discount, there shouldn't be a problem. I think that there is also a tax problem why safes don't really work that well in Germany, because you don't really, I mean, it's not that, what is it? It's not designed for under German law, and I have not, well, I was asked to do a conversion of the safe into German law, and I didn't do it. But
So just like totally untested.
yeah, it's pretty much untested. I think it probably there are some around, but it's I think the convertible note, it came from the U.S. market as well, and it was adapted under German law, and I think something like that existed for a while, but it took a while until all those clauses pretty much got the same as in the United States, and when we now have the system with capital increase and with having a loan and not, so this is pretty much tested. I'm not too sure about having no loan at all. Like, I don't know what that would be actually, but yeah, you can have that. I mean, that's for you not too bad because it feels like you never have to pay it back, but it's not the purpose of the it's not a bridge financing because it's a really long bridge and no one knows if it's ever ending. It's like maybe there's a leprechaun at the other end. I don't know what. So it's not the purpose. You could have that, and if you have someone a lender that you want to take advantage of, then make a really long due date and get that money. That's really friendly terms. But I think you wanted to say something.
You? Me? Or me? You? No.
All right. No.
I agree with your answer.
Very good.
A quick question, we take a couple of ones and then we all go drink beers. Just kidding.
Hi. So I want to ask about dilution. For example, a company issues a convertible note, and before the next investment round, company issues employee stock options, or the next investor demands that employee stock options will not get them diluted. How the convertible note owner, does he get diluted with these stock options or not?
When you issue, at least in France, I think it's the same in the US and the UK, when you issue the stock option plan, you have to create these new shares. So if this happens before the conversion of the note, then the investor would not get diluted. And if it happens after the conversion, then you would get diluted.
So if I want a convertible note investor to get diluted, I just need to do it before I issue the note, right? No. Or it doesn't matter?
Okay.
Ah, okay.
Because we obviously,
Okay.
I mean, the way you do it is you do the ESOP with the round usually, right? So as a convertible note holder, I mean, the important thing is in the convertible note, you need to be aware, like also with the cap as a founder, is it fully diluted or non-fully diluted? There's some like small differences. Also on LICPREF, there's some convertible notes saying basically like I invest in the same terms at the new investor, right? Which is quite common in convertible note, but that has some implications on the LICPREF, for example, right? Because the convertible note holder, then the question is, do I get the LICPREF on the cash that I invested, or do I get the LICPREF on the price per share? So is the discount even overcompensated? So these kind of small differences are important, but I think with regards to ESOP, that usually is created with a round, and then the question is, as an investor, do you want that ESOP to be created before you invest? So basically it doesn't dilute you, so you invest on a fully diluted basis, or do you want it to be created after? And if it's created after, then the shares are issued, and then obviously everybody dilutes from that.
Okay.
Right, last question. Do you have one?
You go, Hugo. Yeah.
I have too many questions. Who understands nothing?
That was one question.
There's the last one. Yeah.
Yesterday I talked to Leapfunder, a platform doing business angel money by convertible notes. It's big in Holland, in the Netherlands, and they said they even do 2 or 3 rounds, one after the other, by that convertibles. Do you have any experience with that? Actually, I didn't ask if they or let's say he told me that it's some kind of also just using the platform as technical systematic for starting with friends and family to show that someone has trust in the idea, and then some business angel money collecting. Yeah, and so based on what blackmailing stories you talked about, I wonder if this would be a possibility to outpay the loans with the second round from the first round. Is it legally easily possible, because it's simply according the contract? Would it be possible, or would it be bad for the lender?
Well, usually you get money to not pay back any loans, so that's not the point. I mean, depending on the contract, you could, like, which is not a good start for a relationship. But I mean, if you're really transparent about it with the new lender, and he's like, okay, we'll take part of this and we pay the other guy back, and this could be a strategy, actually. I mean, it would be legal in that case. If it could be that he doesn't want that other guy with him in the next round, and he's just preparing his own financing round. So typically, I wouldn't think that you typically want just one convertible round, and you gather a lot, and then you prepare for the financing round, because the terms are not that long. But what you just described could work. It's kind of mean, but.
But if you have a good lawyer, then that's not possible. So it's also not the point. I mean, then of course you can optimize. Then someone pays you a higher cap, you pay back the old one, but it's. I mean, first of all, that's like whenever we do a convertible, that's simply not possible. So it's. But secondly, I think it also shouldn't be the case.
Actually, I was more wondering how the calculation, if the second, and still this, I will ask the Liebfunder guy next time, if the second round gets the same terms than the first round, or
no, but it doesn't have to be that way. So, and it happens quite a lot that these convertibles pile on top of each other, and the only thing that happens then is it gets really messy, right? Because you have different share prices, different discounts, different caps, and suddenly as a founder you have no idea how much you're diluting in the round, because you've kind of have had all these notes flying in before the equity round. So I would advise against just doing convertible after convertible after convertible, because at some point you want to just set it straight, draw a line, then you have a cap table and you have investors officially, and I think then you can focus.
Yeah, the other question.
Yeah, it's called a convertible loan, and it's a way for you to raise money. But like, if you expect to pay it back, just call it a loan and don't do a convertible. It's just a way for you to actually not set the valuation today, but like expect all the time that you're not going to pay it back, just going to convert into shares. And I agree with Philippe. Always, you might be able to change the cap because you raise another convert 6 months later and the business has improved a lot, but don't play with discounts and all these things.
And one more question about the numbers of dilution. Actually, I don't know if the numbers you showed with the 55, 57% after the first round are some kind of thing to expect. It seems to me after the first round, with having balanced the lenders, seems a bit less, of the founders. What is to expect it?
I mean, I also think it's not realistic numbers, or it shouldn't.
So these are just for example, like purposes. I could only calculate with those numbers. We could make it 10x or something, but it's not realistic in any ways. Okay.
I mean, from my experience, or also the people that I see in my peer group, if you raise a convertible that is not just 25K but maybe 100 or 150 in the beginning, you shouldn't. I would say you shouldn't give away, or that shouldn't convert into more than 5, 7, maybe 10% maximum. But and then in the next round, maybe 20% if you raise, I don't know, if you raise a decent seed or a market seed. So then you still have more than
so
70%.
so really quite comparable to business angel investment and stuff. So regular shares. I'm relaxed now to hear that. I was simply surprised, and I couldn't I had no feeling for that.
But then there should still be some equity for employees. I think that's actually really important, also from an entrepreneur's perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Big round of applause for those 4 guys.
Que la famille.